What's up? What's up? Are we live? Are we live? No more drip, 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 drip. There's no more drip, drip, drip for disclosure, people. It's a full-out flood. It's seriously. There's no more drip, drip. It is now a flooding fucking river. That's gonna take people years to, catch up on all the physics and all the science that's happening and has happened or is coming to light now. Very interesting stuff. This was posted June 23rd, today, 8 hours ago. Transferring orbital angular momentum of light to plasmonic excitations and metamaterials. Very cool. Excuse me. Sorry about that. So, we got some messages here, and I'm going to be doing the live chat like I said. We were going to be, I said earlier, I got a bunch of information dumped, and I said join us at, a little after 10, and we're going to be doing a live stream and answering more questions from the audience and seeing what people want to know. So we have our first question from Base Cannon here. I've been trying to get the stream right for the past 20 minutes. It keeps telling me the current resolution, which is not optimal. I don't know what I tried every resolution on my streaming software, and none of them are optimal. So whatever. Screw you guys. I hope you guys can read the stuff. If I need to zoom in on anything, let me know. But I'll post the links that I'm showing in the description of the live stream down here as well, so people can see those as they pop up. I'll try to keep up on that. So Base Cannon. Alien scientists, do you have an opinion on Igor Witkowski and the Nazi Belle de Glock research? Oh yes, indeed. So this is all some stuff that I've talked about a little bit. I've been struggling to find what the physics are for that Nazi de Glock. So the Glock is if you look this up, it's called a hoax. It's in parentheses as a hoax. There was this whole thing with the de Glock, for those of you who are not up to speed on this. There was a Project Reese is the giant, it's called. The giant. So this is Project Reese. This was a real project, and there were some real tunnel systems that were built, and there was some real top secret research that was going on in the across the border in Poland, at this facility, codenamed the Giant, or the Rhys. Rhys, or Rhys. Yeah, the Rhys. So this was definitely some interesting research that was going on there down in the tunnels. It sounds like some early, aspects of quantum and relativity. So this is like the birth of quantum and relativity theory. And it's kind of spawned off these other theories that because there was all these people at the Solvay conference for physics, and Einstein kind of got chosen as like the guy to be like, for some reason Einstein got super famous, and all the other work that all these other quantum physicists really put in is only really known by the people that really study physics and study the history of the quantum science and the research. But there's so many people, as we've been talking about, that are really, really of interest in there, including Steinmetz, who is sort of the short little hunchback guy in a lot of these in a lot of those images. Steinmetz had some really interesting stuff, as we recall. We talked about this a little bit in the last, some of the previous streams. But what's interesting is that the Nazi Bell experiment is you had all these physicists coming, the birth of quantum theory and the birth of relativity in the 1920s, right around the 30 years that shook physics from basically 1900 to 1930, especially the last decade in the 1920s, which was really the birth and the foundations of quantum theory and a theory that's pretty much remained unchanged for almost 100 years now. We've been kind of with the same theory and haven't really emerged on a deeper level of understanding. What I think that deeper level is something similar to the graph theory, information or computational understanding of physics, which Wolfram Physics Project is now taking up. Stephen Wolfram, the computational mathematician genius, started this whole, hypergraph representation of these systems, and is trying to basically come up with a. He thinks that that the universe works on some type of computational language that's more pure and simple than for all of and more fundamental to all of physics and mathematics. And I don't think he's wrong, but I think he's wrong on some of his ideas about this and his basic model and his structure of everything. I think it's much more simple than some of his ideas that the proton could be a structure of thousands of vertices. As I said, 2 years before Wolfram released his physics project, I came out with the Hover Brothers, with my fellow researcher and really my one of a good mentor to me. He knows so much about physics and was really a great physicist and a friend of mine, Ken Griggs. Me and him had started Hover Brothers in 2018. Basically, the history behind that is we had this. I've kind of had these groups who've been discussing all this other alternative research into propulsion and gravity technologies. And back in 2018, when To the Stars Academy came out with this whole, when it first founded, they released this image and they had all this talk about how they were going to build a craft and they were going to bring the science and the technology out, and they had a science team and all this other teams to basically bring the science out and talk about it. And I was like, no, these guys are Pentagon insiders and they're really just using I don't know. I had this whole theory about TTSA back then that was pretty much right on before a lot of these other people were coming out and saying it. But there's still a lot of people that believe in TTSA. They don't really know the science or what's going on, and the lack of real developments that have come out of TTSA and where the real science and developments are and who's talking about it. But that's kind of like what prompted me to do this. Is they said they're going to build this craft, and they put out this picture, and then they released this whole thing, and they were getting millions. They were getting $1 million in funding by the time I released Hover Brothers. It was like 3 months after. I think they came out in October of 2018, and we released in December of 2018, just a couple months later when we got everything together. But it was basically just like a way to compete with to the Stars Academy, like at least to have an independent source checker or someone else to like be saying, oh, we're you're not the only ones doing this, and you're not gonna like come in and just steal the show and forget all the research that other people have been doing and which they haven't. And they've really said not a lot about the anti-gravity technology, and we've kind of have stepped up to fill that void and really bring that out. And that's kind of what Hover Brothers started as, is to compete with them and to bring out some real research, and also try to get some experimenters together who've done experiments, and also just start the foundation of a network, because I know these people are out there. I know there's other people working on this. I know I'm not the only one. And I keep running into individuals and in all walks of life, even people who worked in these kind of programs that are borderline classified, research and stuff, because a lot of this propulsion technology came from things like Tony Robertson, and Stafe 2 and Glenn Robertson is his real name. He goes by Tony, but it's Tony Robertson, and he runs STAFE. So the STAFE conference, if you can look up STAFE conference, yeah, Paul Murat on the STAFE conference talks about it right here. So STAFE, and then STAFE 2 was created after STAFE kind of fell apart. And then there was another, I think before that, it used to be called SpaceIF. SpaceIF Gravity, yeah. And not specific gravity. Not specific gravity. It was SpaceIF, and that stood for, I forget what that stood for. I have it all, but Frank Zinardzik sent me a bunch of that stuff back in the day when I was into this Podkletnov and that other research. So yeah, so supercooled mercury or whatever, this mercury plasma that's spun in this disk. Right, that's what this Igor Witkowski's whole thing is, with this Nazi bell. And if it was real, we'd need some kind of like real physics for how it would work, and some explanation for how it might work. It sounds like some low-level experimentation with some of these warp field or warp phenomenon that we've been researching lately, including, you know, this quantized inertia paper. There's a paper on here about modified inertial mass from information loss. So it talks about information loss and Rindler Horizons. There was a paper on here. I gotta find the exact one that talks about this. But there's one that talks about how you can. We finally figured out how to like create this, because the whole theory was that it was torsion. This was what Victor Schauberger and torsion fields, that the spinning of the torsion of the fields, that's basically like the whole theory that had been around for years. And this is pretty much why I abandoned the Nazi bell, and it's because of how are you going to create an experiment with that? Mercury is really toxic, really dangerous, and hard to work with. Is there anything similar that could kind of elucidate this effect? If there is an effect, what else do we have in physics to compare this to? And people were saying, oh, well, it's kind of like torsion. You get these two counter-rotating disks, and the counter-rotating drums kind of create these forces on the thing, but no one could really, describe what those forces were, or really quantify them, or explain why they could produce these sorts of things. So it's interesting. What I wanted to point out is that so torsion was the first idea for this. There was something else related to torsion fields or something I was going to point out. But the other idea is that now we have a new theory for that could explain how this Nazi bell or this Glock kind of technology might work. It's that, and it's related to Mike McCulloch's work, because there's a paper that he posted about, I think it's this one, hiding gravitational sources behind a Rindler horizon. Yeah, this is it. So this basically explains how, like, you can, when you're rotating something, it creates this Rindler horizon. This plasma could basically be creating these Rindler horizons, and that it's hiding information behind that, so you could basically disconnect it. Very interesting stuff. So we actually have some kind of potentially a theoretical basis for testing this, anyway. So for this gyroscopic effect, or whatever the heck it is. But one thing I want to point out is that, yeah, if you were going to build a flywheel, rotating mercury in a flywheel would be a pretty good idea, to do. Just don't use aluminum or copper or other metals, because mercury likes to form what are called amalgams. Mercury amalgams, and you can see all the different amalgams that mercury can form with all the different metals, so you can get an idea of what kind of metal you should be using with mercury to do experiments. And you probably shouldn't even be doing experiments with mercury, honestly, unless you really know what you're doing. Yeah, but this seems like some old technology. I'm not sure if anything ever came to it, but we definitely would have to do some experiments with this, and we don't. No one in my group is really like down to like fuck with mercury. We're all like, no, we're all set. We're kind of like afraid of that, you know, to a large extent, and at least we don't have the funding to build a facility, which will be up to the task of properly containing and dealing with mercury experiments. So we're not there yet. Um, Much more interested in plasmonic excitations in metamaterials and this recent stuff that I've been talking about with insect chitin and the possibility of making metamaterials using insects or insect skins and insect exoskeletons as a basis instead, growing these crystals, these metamaterials, rather than actually 3D printing them or doing cold spray or sputter coating or any of these other thin film nanotechnology methods. We could basically grow them. That's my new idea, is that we can grow these metamaterials somehow. We can grow the skins that we need, the types of skin coatings if we need to. Just enough to do tests, on some of this stuff. Yeah, this is the link I was looking for with the counter-rotating discs. The torsion fields. I hate when I'm like looking for the link and I have too many tabs open and I'm trying to find the link and I lose my train of thought while I'm looking through my tabs to try to find the link. All right, so this Wilmhurst machine, 2 counter-rotating drums, again, and it creates this kind of spark gap. It builds up charge on this thing, and then these 2 counter-rotating discs spin, builds up a charge on each plate, and it jumps the spark gap. Very interesting. Very interesting. It's better than a Van de Graaff generator because it doesn't reverse polarity, and it separates electric charges through electrostatic induction. Influence. So that's why it's called the influence machine. That's what electrostatic induction is. It's electric influence. So yeah, so this electrostatic induction, if you have this chitin, this nanomaterial, you put some electrostatic field on it, and boom, it creates this induction inside these wings, which then terminate or permeate or whatever you want to call it through those electrodes, those electrode microstructures that I showed in the earlier stream. Where the heck is that stuff now? I had that. I don't even know where the article went, but I had that picture. Let me find the picture. Boom. Yeah, I'll bring it up on the screen. So here's the picture. These were SEM images of those microstructures on these wings and on the bottoms of these insects, the scarab beetles. So they look like basically these, electrode towers. Very interesting. I'm sure there's more and there's more research that needs to be done into these, is discovering which of these insect materials, like if there's a bunch of wings in the animal kingdom, like what's the biggest, heaviest beetle with the smallest wings that can still fly, and then test its wings and test a couple different beetle wings to kind of see which one has the best kind of effect. And this videos of this. There was a video I watched. I couldn't find it earlier, but yeah, here's some testing scarab wings. So other people have done this. Other people have done this experiment.
All
So
right.
this guy.
So I've been looking into Viktor Gorbenikov lately, and I had some June.
So he got some of the wings out, and he
Right.
puts them
So
on this charged plate and
I
drops
can't
them to
say for
show
sure if
this.
this is a
But they have
beetle shell effect.
incredibly
This thing
interesting properties. These are nanomaterials.
jumped a
This
little
is
bit.
nature's
Stick.
nanomaterials. It's really
I don't know if you can see
fascinating.
the angle on
Look
that.
at what they're able to do. So
So
they'll
that's
stick
interesting.
to stuff, but they kind of stick to the plate in a weird
Anyway,
way.
I have not been able to get them to hover over each other, but I'm still working on it. I just found this out today. I wanted to get a video out there. So, um, I'm kind of thinking this is more static electricity, but if it's not, um, I'm thinking it's more any beetle that can fly. I don't know if it's one specific beetle. But anyway, there's some results for a
Yeah, so
scanner.
they've got videos of these things float, and he thinks it's electrostatic. There's a lot of theories about this, man, and but one of them is that they're basically these things are little M drives, little kind of warp drives, exhibiting low level warp drive effects, just like these counter spinning wheels, and that Gershmick device, the Grumschwick. Where the hell is it? The Greenhurst device. Alright, but I can't find it now. I don't know where this stuff went. Deriving quantized inertia. There's a whole bunch of papers on here. They're really short and easy to read if anyone wants to check them out. But the QI research, quantizedinertia.com/researches. Really cool stuff as far as a new and interesting theory. Different than what Wolfram and Phoenix is. Definitely very different than that, but still cool. Spiders using hundreds of miles on, they can fly on webs, blah, blah, blah. So, wow, how can these spiders um, fly hundreds of miles? Oh yeah, so this was Charles Darwin. He said the ship had been boarded by thousands of intruders. These tiny red spiders, each a millimeter wide, were everywhere. The ship was 60 miles off the shore, so 60 miles. So from the Argentinian mainland, these things floated and dropped down on a ship and fringed with gossamer web. So like all of them did this ballooning behavior, and Charles Darwin noticed it, and they were spiders have been found 2.5 miles up in the air and 1,000 miles out to sea by scientists. That's freaking amazing. So they don't know how this happens. They did some experiments and tests, and turns out, yeah, well, they wait for this 40,000 thunderstorms around the world every day, and they collectively turn the Earth's atmosphere into a giant electrical circuit. And electricity is part of the weather. It's a weather phenomenon essentially, and they wait for the weather to be perfectly right for this electric weather, and that's when they build their balloon webs, and they actually catch a ride on this electrostatic, propulsion or flight propulsion. So that's interesting. Um, yeah, so the M drive is this chart is Woodward effect, the Mach effect. It's also called, right? Um, Here it is, and there's another word for it called the Mach effect. Yeah, M effect, MET, the Mach effect thruster. So it's the Woodward effect or the Mach effect. If you look up Mach effect, then you'll get Woodward effect. But yeah, they're both pretty much the same thing. Someone suggested that Whelan-Feynman absorber theory was a way to explain it. It's similar, but So the whole idea, we kind of came up with this in the group. I don't know if we want to share all as kind of like our private group. So I kind of felt bad sharing a little bit of this information, but it's just it's so many people are coming to this conclusion, and other members of my group kind of qualitatively put this forward, but we're still trying to get like a quantitative explanation for it. So Jeremiah came up with this whole observation that basically when you speed charges up really fast and then slow them down or slam them into things really fast, that they break certain speed limits and they push off this kind of like these speed limits. It's almost like when you approach the speed of light or pass it, you kind of create these speed limits. And those speed limits are actually called Rindler Horizons. Um, and it's an information horizon. So it's basically a theory of physics which looks at physics as information instead as opposed to just matter or energy or whatever. It's information, and that when you pass this information horizon, what happens is information gets lost because it gets trapped and can't make it beyond that horizon. It's gone forever. So information gets lost beyond this horizon. So and that's kind of what happens in mass. That's why objects have mass. That's what he says, is that mass is blocking of information by Rindler horizons. That matter is this kind of all matter is comprised of these particles which kind of have mass, and the mass is sort of this bouncing around of trapped light, like almost like mass is a trapped form of light that's bouncing around inside this ball of this entangled web of point. It's basically bouncing around on a bunch of entangled vertices. It's light trapped on a couple of vertices. And as that light bounces around on those vertices, or the entangled structures bounce around on that vertices as light, it produces these Rindler horizons, and that blocks information elsewhere in the networks. So as information comes across and hits it, it blocks it, and that creates a blocking of information in the network. The network compensates for the blocking of information by adjusting, and the adjustment is the force of gravity. And very interesting stuff. So yeah, basically when you put that static charge, or it speeds up these charges, is that they slam. So information is a photon is a packet of information. It has a frequency, it has an amplitude, and it tells something about where it came from. As you're looking back in time and assembling these photons, it has information in it. So that's kind of the whole idea behind that Phoenix theory, is that what we're dealing with is just a series of information exchanges. And my hard drive is not working very well for some reason. But I have more images to share. But yeah, if I look up the Hubbard Brothers page, let me go back to that. I'm going to be updating this site and adding more stuff because we got a couple more things I wanted to add to this Hubbard Brothers theory page, including all the Mike McCulloch stuff on this. But yeah, I think Mike McCulloch's theories goes a little bit further than Woodward's theory on the Mach effect, and it describes essentially the same thing, those M drives. And what that M drive is. Alright, so how does the resonant cavity thruster work? So this impossible drive, which creates, this net thrust on one net radiation force, and it's a hollow frustrum. So you get the magnetron, and you just pump it with these microwaves, and it's conical shaped. So you get a larger force on this disc and a smaller force on this disc as the waves bounce back and forth in this kind of cavity. But what's really happening, this is a simplified of the prototype by Martin Tajmar. Of course, he's not he's not getting the details right on the effect. I don't think. It has to be a sawtooth wave, with a real rapid rise time, really super fast rise time, because that rise time slams those electrons past that horizon, and then when they pass that horizon, the information gets lost, and then when they slow down and hit on the other side, that there's an asymmetry in the amount of in the information in the system, and that causes a net force or a net thrust in one direction. And that's kind of my interpretation of it. I could be wrong. But yeah, this is serious business. And it has been for 20 years now. Okay, so watching from Sandia National Laboratory, Office of Scientific National. Oh, dude, we got someone watching from Office of Scientific Research and Development, the Thermal Test Complex. Thank you, sir. Magnetic vortex resonance. Very interesting. What's that? Magnetic vortex resonance. Ooh, this is cool. This is cool. Well, thank you very much. I love it when people like this tune in and share some cool information. And I got a couple of people that are just like, I can't share anything with you because it would violate my, laws on export of technology and stuff. But I can tell you hot or cold, you know. No, it's always cool. When I get a hot signal, someone's like, yep, you're on the money now, or no, not so much on this. And that's always good because we're just searching for right now and really trying to put all these pieces together and figure this shit out, man. I also earlier I talked about those two. I talked about the carbonado diamonds that are harder than regular diamond on the Mohs scale, and they only appear in those two places on Earth, in Central African Republic and in Brazil. There's another weird type of mineral called shungite that only pretty much occurs in this one place in Karelia, Russia, at Shunga village, right? And it's very, very rare elsewhere in the world. There's a couple little places where it shows up, but it's really it's classed within younger sedimentary rocks. So they think it's a sedimentary rock and it's a type of sedimentary rock, but it's really like could have been so old that I really don't know. What's interesting about this stuff is it's really good at cleaning water. It's good at water purification. Very interesting because water purification is a big problem, especially on a spaceship. Um, you need nanomaterials to basically, because water is really heavy and bringing it up with you is a problem. So if you got a way to filter and reuse water, it's a huge, huge piece of the puzzle of living in space and surviving in space for long periods of time is solved. So I thought that was interesting. These, and if anyone knows of any kind of, we got any rock nerds on here that know of any kind of other interesting things. We're looking for geology that could be consistent with, maybe an extraterrestrial crash or, a piece of this megastructure. Anything we really want to look for scientifically to kind of piece this together, because I kind of have this idea that, if aliens have existed or have been around, and this galaxy really is as old as we think it is and stuff, man, then there's got to be stuff that's already been around and felt, that's out there just waiting to be dug up. Huge stuff that they can't get rid of. So, I don't know. Just an idea. Maybe I'm completely fucking nuts with it, but whatever. It's all about resonance and coherence. Yeah, yes, there is some certain degree of resonance to it, and I want to talk about electromagnetic spectrum entirely. It's interesting if you look at the maps of the electromagnetic spectrum. And there's a more complete breakdown of all the frequencies if you go to FCC allocation charts. Okay, that's the keyword to search for. But the FCC allocation charts are really, really fucking cool and interesting table. It like literally tells you the whole electromagnetic frequency spectrum breakdown, and tells you what all these frequencies do and what communicates on them. And if you ever get a scanner and you want to tune it to, like, you can just tune it randomly to a channel, you can tune it to some of the stuff. Although you'll notice that some of these bands are for classified, military and other kind of like type bands, and you're not allowed to use them, and you're not supposed to listen on them. And you can try to listen on them, but you probably won't get anything because this is but encrypted signals that you won't be able to decrypt. But it's there. It's interesting. A lot of those frequencies are blocked on people's scanners. If you ever buy a police scanner, they usually come with a chip that's built in that pre-blocks a lot of those frequencies that are used by, you know, some of these people, some of these banned frequencies. But you can also remove the chips or pay someone to, they also sell broken scanners, or jailbroken scanners, whatever they called. They jailbreak them so that they get those frequencies back. But anyways, some interesting stuff on frequencies is that, I never knew this, but, there's actually a gap in the electromagnetic spectrum. Yeah. Never really would have thought, I always thought it was continuous. I never knew about that there was a gap in the electromagnetic spectrum. And this is kind of interesting because this is something that Tom DeLonge kind of talked about a little bit when he was on Joe Rogan, man. They had him on Joe Rogan. He was blabbering on about this stuff. And Joe's asking him the questions. And he's like, terahertz, man. They have this thing and they hit it with the terahertz frequency and then it floats. And that's what's coming out. And that's what he talked about in 2018 on Joe Rogan. And everyone laughed at him because of all the other silliness that he said and how he just looked like he was friggin' high and making an idiot of himself. Really, just, I don't know. It was pretty bad, but still, and almost like he said more than he should have because he immediately shut up about a lot of that stuff, and he made tweets about some of this stuff, and then the tweets would get taken down. So it's really interesting what's going on with Tom DeLonge and TTSA, and if he's not allowed to say it, he like got a hold of some information and then was told he's not allowed to say it or talk about that stuff. And I don't know what they got going on behind the scenes with their private investors and everything that they're doing, but it's interesting that, how put off since joining up with TTSA 2 years ago hasn't really been publishing, hasn't really been making videos or talking about a lot of like in depth about a lot of stuff. So what has he been up to and what is he doing? And that's sort of an interesting question. But yeah, these terahertz gap, man. I never knew there was a fucking gap in the spectrum, and that's really, really kind of weird, especially because it's like almost right smack in the middle of the electromagnetic spectrum, like this, things that are bigger than this frequency and things there's, these low frequency waves, and then, infrared, and then millimeter microwaves, and then boom, you have this gap, and then you have infrared, visible, ultraviolet, and everything else above it. It seems like this gap that's in it is almost like this piece of the electromagnetic puzzle. Now, of course, if I don't believe that there is such a particle as a graviton, or I don't really know about this Higgs boson theory. There's lots of interesting theory, but one of the ideas I like best is that it's just a blocking of information by Rindler Horizons. It's all relative and it's all electromagnetic. That gravity's kind of like a pseudo force that's felt, and we're learning more about what gravity is and how to break it, which is cool. So The radical design compared to the world's most sensitive gravitational wave detectors. So the idea is using photons. This is really, really neat stuff. So the idea is that photons are actually gravitons and the wave carriers, but it's like a summation of them. It's like the noise. It's like the background noise, and what does all the noise reduce to at the end of the day? And so if you can eliminate that background noise, you can eliminate that those reductions and control them essentially. So that's the idea. I want to read some questions from the group, and we'll see what we got. If anyone wants to see what we got for questions, blah, 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 blah. There are ancient vehicle tracks all throughout Turkey, thousands of kilometers of them. They are 3 million-year-old sediment. These vehicles are at independent suspension and were not carts. That's cool, man. I'd like to look at more artifacts and stuff like that because I really feel like this Earth is, and our species is maybe older than we've been told, and that our history tells us. And I've been hearing rumors that there's going to be some kind of event soon that's going to really show humanity that there's going to be something found or something revealed that, and it's not, I don't know anything about it other than just rumors. But something's going to get revealed. That's what I've been told by a couple different people that are in weird ways. So that something's coming out and it's going to reveal like something about our past and who we are. That's going to change a lot of the history. And I really hope that happens, man. That would be really, really cool. As you know, the Indian mound builders were the first people that lived on this continent. Those are like the real natives. And they built all these mounds at these World Heritage sites. There's a couple of them around. This one's out near Illinois. There's a bunch of this pre-Columbian earthwork in North America and Mesoamerica, including a Stonehenge kind of site up in New Hampshire that I've been still need to visit. Been talking about this place for a while. This summer I'm gonna do it. And I'm gonna visit the Barney and Betty Hill gas station rest stop there. That's up in New Hampshire. Apparently, there's a gas station that's built and dedicated to Betty and Barney Hill, and has all kinds of history in the gas station about the famous UFO abduction case of the 50s. This one's in Ohio. It's the Serpent Mound, and they were obsessed with snakes. Snakes were like their guide or entrance to the underworld, apparently. Lots of archaeological surveys on these kinds of things, man. Parking sites, so they're very interesting. Oh, you did a report on the Mound Builders. Yeah, the Mound Builders were like the old people that built all this stuff, man, long ass time ago. But let me see. Thought construct light encoded reality matrix. The Perry Reese map. Oh, this sounds interesting. What is it? Perry Reese map of Antarctica. Oh, that's. Oh, that sounds cool. So that's a map that mentions Antarctica from 1513 when they shouldn't have known. Interesting. Yeah, man, there's history's really been weaponized against us and suppressed. In any case, I'm getting super fucking tired, and I was hoping that I'd have some people jump on with me to help me out kind of through this. What geometry would you suggest for higher dimensions? So that's an interesting thing. I want to talk about a second about geometry and higher dimensions. 5D crystals are a thing. Okay, they can talk about this using them for data storage, so they can store data in actually in crystals. 5D optical data storage is a real thing. So you want to talk about crystals and all this stuff, man. This is the future of it. 3D optical, 5D optical data storage. I don't know if this is the same thing. Femto laser writing process. So 5D optical crystals. I don't know if that's the same thing as I'm thinking of. They basically, so just like quasi crystals are basically, they're three-dimensional projections of 4 and 5 or more hyperdimensional crystals. So it's actually a mathematical structure that kind of exists in a higher dimension, but this is a projection of it onto lower 3D space, which is really cool because if you want to access, higher dimensions through lower dimensions, this is definitely a key way of seeing and figuring out how to do that. Because if you want to if you got something like this, it's acting on both those dimensions, so you can have a cross-dimensional like coupling, so to speak. So if you vibrate this crystal in 3 dimensions, you could be vibrating things in hyperdimensional space, essentially, which would be cool. As far as alternative dimensions go, and what time is, I think that causality is a key thing that holds this universe together. Causality, there has to be something that causes stuff. It doesn't just happen for no reason. But time is a weird thing, man, and I kind of have this different idea about time, that the way time works, if we look at the Wheeler-Feynman stuff, or the Wheeler-Feynman absorber theory, or the quantum eraser experiment. If we look at stuff like quantum eraser experiment and Wheeler-Feynman absorber theory, it's almost like time is taking 2 steps forward and 1 step back. It's like time isn't linear. It goes forward and backwards in time, and there's all these particles that have that backward and forward in time and interaction. And that's sort of that's why I liked Phoenix theory's explanation for it all, because it had those those loops and arrows were the forward and backward in time entanglements. So things could be entangled forward or backward in time, and so they could be entangled positively or negatively, and that they could have terminations which were positive or negative. For forwards and backwards in times. And then when they created a loop or a connection that was a loop between those two vertices, is essentially, it creates a loop that where information travels forward and backwards in time in a consistent loop and kind of stays there. But it still progresses on to the next stage. It doesn't there's decay and all that other reasons, but I'll get into all that. It's basically like that's why I said time goes 2 steps forward and 1 steps back. It doesn't just travel in a linear fashion. It doesn't just jump. Time doesn't just jump regularly and go point to point. It's not just, as Wolfram sees it, as this iterations of the function, through function space, or through this hyperspace, iterations of the hypergraph, and each iteration is time. Time doesn't go like that. Time goes two steps forward, and then it jumps a step back, and then it goes 2 steps forward and jumps a step back, and that that jumping back and in between is where all the magic of the universe kind of happens and things fall together. I really believe, and that's all I'm gonna leave it on for tonight, man. Just to think about that. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. It's not just chunk. It's not just a continual chunking of iterations through the function. There's this more. There's a little bit extra step of complexity to it. But anyways, I'm gonna think about this a little bit harder and sleep on it. And well, that's where free will exactly. CMS. I'll answer your question and leave this off. And I'm glad for tuning in to this. Yeah, this is where free will exactly fits into the equation because of that because it's jumping forward and then backward in time. It gives us that free will to basically that when it jumps back forward in time, it can either go to we can change that. We can when it jumps back in time, then it goes back forward in time, and that gives us that free will to make a choice to change the future. You know what I mean? And that's where consciousness fits in, because everyone's like, "Oh, your theory has to have consciousness in it, and if it doesn't have consciousness in your model, then that's not good." Well, there's consciousness in the model. It's this theory of that time is consciousness because it's jumping forward and backward in time. It's recognizing itself, and then consciously, the future is affecting the past. Well, the past is affecting the future in this cyclical loop. Pretty neat stuff. All right, thanks, guys. Look forward to developing this further. And hey, please email me on, guys, email me thealienscientist@gmail.com. All right, that's my email. thealienscientist@gmail.com. All right. Get connected, because what we're going to do is we're going to set up this disclosure network soon. I'm got a bunch of people that have been saving information and saving stuff up. We're going to put together basically a network, and we're going to do a big file dump and share it with everyone in a little small private group first, so that way everyone has a copy and a backup, and then we're going to go full disclosure public, kind of in a slow process, so that way we can get all this information backed up and secure it over through as many different people. So if you're interested in being part of that disclosure process and being one of the first people and you have a lot of people in your own network who are down with this sort of thing that would be willing to share and back up information just in case there's a run on it, which I don't think there will be at this point. I think the cat's already too far out of the bag. They're never ever going to stuff the cat back in the bag. There's no fucking possible way to stop what's coming. They'd be wasting their time and just opening themselves up to further persecution and revelation, because this is really we're coming to terms with finding the people who have been holding us back from these advancements, and talking about what would happen if Tesla's bloodline was the Rothschilds bloodline was replaced with Nikola Tesla's, when we took all these greedy rich fucks who just have been focusing all their time on enslaving humanity and turning Earth into a giant plantation, versus people that were trying to bring the future, and really we should be. It's 2020, man. We should be so much further along. Like, I can't even imagine how awesome and incredible the world would look today and should look today if these fucking rich assholes weren't destroying everything. And it just makes me sick to my stomach to see what's happened with the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, and everything else. And you can't. They've created all these barriers to entry to the system, so that if you're not one of the club and you're not rich, then you're just going to get fucked over and milked, and your ideas are going to get stolen and make someone else rich, while enslaving you and your family. It's just crazy. But we need to unite. We need to advance together as a species, humanity. And even though those people fucked up in the past and they've been rich assholes, maybe it'd be a good time to reach out to people that are billionaires, like Richard Branson or Elon Musk. I think would be the two guys first on the boat with some of this stuff. we need billionaires to fund this and get this on board for the next shift in humanity. We need to get off this planet. That's my main sincerity and my main goal in this whole thing has always been, it's just, we got it. We're gonna die here on this earth. We need to pass the great filter. And there's a great filter that's filtering out all the civilizations, and the Drake equation will tell you about there's a filter function in the Drake equation. And you know that filter function is this is it, the length of time that such civilizations release detectable signals into space. And basically, we have to get off this planet and get out of here before our time's up, before the meteor destroys us, before we destroy ourselves, before we destroy our home planet. And this is an awesome planet. We really just can't like destroy this planet and leave and go find somewhere else. We need to like really take care of this planet and fix this planet, because there's so much fucking wrong with this planet. So many species that are going extinct because they're they live in zones which the land is worth money to people. So it's worth more money than a species alive, and development in the name of this false sense of progress. It's kind of sad. Where we are as a species right now, and where we're going and the path we're headed down. It's really one of complete darkness and evil. And especially with everything that's coming to light this year, with the level of depravity and pure filth that the rich have been really up to, the rich and powerful, with Jeffrey Epstein and that whole scandal. Definitely we haven't gotten to the bottom of that. The judges keep trying to pry the files open and release more of the names, and they keep getting assassinated or killed or scared off the case. It's just crazy what's going on with that still. But we need to defeat these evil people, these evil billionaires, and these evil forces in the planet. We need to work together to overcome all this, and also bring these new technologies out in a way that's gonna, I don't know, it's very, it's not mine to disclose, I don't think, altogether, but yeah, this stuff's coming out. We'll figure it out one way or the other. It would probably be better if they just came out and released it, or did some type of disclosure, though, before it does come out, because I don't know. I don't know. I just, it's crazy everything that's going on right now, and how little attention the real issues and the real science and the real stuff's getting compared to a lot of the disinfo and fake stuff that has just no real information and no depth to it. So it's just, we're in a weird time, man. There's a lot of forces at play here, and a lot of it's not going to be no instantaneous disclosure. Everyone's going to wake up unless, and I really fear about what's going to happen in the mainstream, and the people that have control over that, and the narrative that they're pushing, and the information that they're going to release, or make, pretend that this is about, when it's really about, it's really about humanity and our future. And they're going to make it about, the military industrial complex, or some kind of thing that benefits them, which is, bumping our chest into flaunting to China that we have this kind of tic-tac technology or something, that, that don't mess with us, don't start World War III, don't come collecting your economic debt, you don't want to mess with us, we got friggin' alien technology out here. You don't know what we have. There's a mix of that going on with so much more. These radar tracking apps that they're going to use, like, who's collecting that data on these apps that people have on their phones? They're reporting these, they're reporting drones. You guys are filming and reporting and on drones. If it was real advanced, like military or alien technology, it would probably have metamaterial invisibility cloaks, or some kind of carbon nanotube invisibility cloak. There's tons of ways to do it, and you need quantum radar to see them. It's just plain as that. You can't just see these things with regular technology or with just cameras or your eye or whatever, if they were really that advanced. So, again, I'm falling asleep. I think I nailed it better earlier in my live stream this afternoon, but yes, I know I need sleep, man. Way out of loop on that Tic Tac thing. Oh, that Tic Tac thing. So guy to look up on to get in the loop. Jack Sarfati's been posting a lot of cool stuff about the Tic Tac stuff. He talks about this metamaterial, talks about that how it flies, how it really works. All very, very much in agreement and with a lot of the stuff that I've been saying about metamaterials in this. But again, it's a little bit slightly different theory that Jack has on some of these things, some different ideas. All this stuff needs to be tested experimentally in the laboratory. And really, theory is great. You can have, it doesn't matter how smart you are, how great your theory is, how many degrees you have, how cool you are, or what your name is. If it disagrees with experiment, it's wrong. And that simple statement is the key to science. And that's been my guiding factor, my shining light, shining beacon of light in all of this is, what do the experiments tell us? What are the experiments saying? And the universe only answers to the question you ask it. And you have to be very careful, very particular about the questions that you ask it in order to get, the answers. So, sleep talking. That was bad, huh? It's all right. I'm going to get some sleep, guys. Thanks very much. And you guys all fucking kick ass and totally rock in the chat. And thank you for being part of this and tuning in and contributing such great comments and questions to this discussion. We're going to get it. Yes, both asleep and not asleep. Both awake and not fully awake. Still awakening. Even though I'm going to sleep, I'm still waking up. If that makes any sense. And all this metaphors and whatnot. All right, guys, good night. Get some rest. We'll do another one of these soon, man. For sure.